Hi, welcome to Open Studios. I'm Sarah Hayden, and I'm delighted to have Karen Kuse here in the studio with me to talk about and really celebrate Maria Montessori and the Montessori method. Thank you so much for coming in and talking with me today, Karen, because I know I have the feeling you love Montessori as much as I do. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sarah, thank you for having me. I am so excited to talk about two of my favorite things, children and the Montessori method. I am a lifelong learner and pretty much a lifelong Montessorian. I discovered the method when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
And have taught Montessori. I have trained teachers to teach Montessori, and about 22 years ago, I became a head of school, and I have been leading Montessori schools across the East Coast.
Wow, that is something. I just love Montessori and came myself upon it because my son had a peanut allergy, and the in-street Montessori was the only school that did not allow nuts, and this was in like 2000 or something like that. It was very early, 1998 maybe. Yeah, 1998. So that's how I got my introduction to Montessori, and I've loved it ever since, and was just so happy to see that we have the Montessori, in-street Montessori, the Newburyport Montessori, and the River Valley Charter School. We are so fortunate in this community to have three elementary primary schools, I guess is what it is.
Especially in such a small city. It's wonderful.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Maria Montessori's method and just, how she got started or...
She was such an amazing woman. She was a real pioneer. She was a scientist and a mathematician. And first, her goal was to become an engineer. And then she changed her path and decided to become a medical doctor. Now, at that time in Bergamo, Italy, where she was from, this is the area of Rome, and at that time in the 1800s, for a female to attend medical school and actually graduate was almost unheard of.
Wow.
And she was one of the first females in Italy to graduate medical school and become a physician.
Wow, at that time, too.
Yep. And being a doctor, she believed that the hand and the brain are closely connected. And when people are doing things with their hands and manipulating things with their hands and figuring things out and putting them together, that true learning occurs. Instead of memorizing things, people are learning through exploration, and they're active participants in their learning process, which is really important, and it's really fun.
It's so interesting that she made that connection between the hands and the brain, because that is one of the things that I found so helpful was the manipulation of learning letters and sound. And for those who have dyslexia, it is just a miracle way of learning. And I had always thought all schools should be teaching like that, but that's not the way it is, but it's out there.
And it's very specialized. What she did was she took the textbooks in Bergamo, Italy, and for every lesson in the textbooks, she created a hands-on manipulative.
Wow.
And we call those Montessori materials. We use words like work and lessons and materials and manipulatives, and they're fun. They feel like you're playing a game like backgammon or chess or checkers, but they're not a game. They're actually a very purposeful manipulative that isolates a concept and really teaches that concept through mastery. And it's a beautiful, fun way to learn.
For those of people who might be listening to us or watching, if you could describe like the classroom, because when I first went into the Montessori classroom, I was like, oh, this is very cool. My son will love this.
It is really beautiful. The Montessori classrooms are designed to be like a home because children spend so many hours in school. We want it to feel very comfortable, very warm. We don't put a lot of things on the walls. We don't like a lot of distractions. And when you walk into a classroom that's got letters and numbers and cutouts and colors and shapes and everything on the walls, is that true learning, or are those just things that distract from the manipulatives on the shelves. So in a Montessori environment, we really want children's attention drawn to the beautiful materials on the shelves. And it actually costs about $20,000 to buy a complete classroom set of Montessori materials.
I think that's so exciting. I just have to interrupt and interject my experience with once I, saw all the Montessori materials. Of course, I had to buy stuff from home, and I brought this in. I have to show. It's the little sifter that Matthew would use for cooking. I just loved it. And when Maeve saw it, she goes, "What is that thing?" It's a mini sifter because you could buy everything in a small size for small hands, and he loved cooking, sewing, all of those things.
Can I see that for a second,
Yes.
Sarah? Sarah, when in Montessori, we call these activities practical life, real life
Yes.
skills that are practical. We actually do them at home. But watch this. You see my fingers here on my right hand? I'm actually developing the pincer grip for holding a
So
pencil.
interesting.
So I'm doing practical life activities. Really fun, right? To be a kid and cook is fun. I mean, sometimes being an adult and cooking is fun.
Can be.
Maybe not the cleaning up part. But here I'm developing my fine motor skill, my hand-eye coordination, because I'm watching carefully as I'm moving with my fingers. And again, I'm developing the pincer grip.
Yes.
So these practical life activities that are real life skills are actually developing indirectly and directly the student for reading and writing.
Interesting.
It is indirect and direct preparation for reading and writing. This is how I learned to hold a pencil. With that.
My son actually, I do think it was from this kind of Montessori training with, things like that, and the sewing and all these things had the most amazing fine motor control to write the most tiny. They wrote Chinese characters because there was one mom who was able to teach Chinese. It was stunning to me. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I just love Montessori. So, I'm so happy that you're here to talk about it because I think it's just a wonderful way of learning. And for people that have children, young children or are going to have children, it's just such a great thing to consider for sure. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the classroom and then maybe how the classroom might change as the child grows.
Sure. That's a great question because the classroom is designed based on the age. So as the children get older, the furniture gets taller, the shelves get higher, and the materials change. So there we follow planes of development. And we believe that the first plane of development is 0 to 6 years old, the formative stages. However, we are not going to put 1-year-olds and 5-year-olds in a classroom together. So the Montessori method, you have schools that have infant rooms, schools that have toddler rooms, but most Montessori schools start at 3 years old. And we have mixed age classrooms, which is really beautiful, and I'd love to share with you why that's so beneficial. We have 3 ages in a classroom. So in a preschool classroom, or we call that primary or children's house, we have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds, or 3 to 6-year-olds. In other words, pre-K3, pre-K4, and kindergarten. And they're mixed together.
Wow. In
an ideal world, you would have a equal amount of students at each age. So if you have 8 3-year-olds, you'd also have 8 4-year-olds and 8 5-year-olds. The next level is what we call lower elementary, and that's 1st through 3rd grade. The next level is upper elementary, that's 4th through 6th grade. Then there are a handful of Montessori schools in the country that go up through high school. So if you have a middle school, it is either going to be 7th through 9th grade. We do not believe in putting 6th graders in middle school. We don't think they've reached that plane of development for adolescence yet. So adolescence in Montessori begins in the 7th grade. And 7 to 9 is middle school. And grades 10 through 12 are high school.
Now, the River Valley goes up till 8th grade.
Which many Montessori schools will stop. If they have a middle school, they'll stop at 8th grade so that students can start high school with their same-aged peers at ninth grade.
Interestingly, we've had so many of our interns, then they turn staff, come from the River Valley Charter School. It's really fun and exciting when I have another person that comes and they said, oh, they went to the charter school, because I just think, oh, that's awesome. We do have other students too that don't go to the charter school that are wonderful too, because I know Maeve's out there in listening to my conversation, and we have wonderful staff, period, but it's sort of an interesting thing that we've had such a large number of Montessori kids, so I think that's interesting.
Do you find that they are extroverted or confident, or
It's interesting. It varies, actually. I find that I've noticed that they're more able to maybe start things on their own, or come up with an idea, or modify an idea, or create things. They've been very helpful in our summer programs, and we have a young man now who's from the charter school and is up at the high school, who will be working with the summer program. So it is interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. They're really self-starters. We teach children to think critically, problem solve, and challenge the norm in a respectful way. So I'm glad to hear that.
So how do you move kids from one classroom into the next, like from the early to the middle to the upper?
Sure. So each level has a 3-year curriculum. And the idea is that we challenge kids according to their ability, not their age. Mm-hmm. You see, we don't believe every 4-year-old's the same because they're 4. We don't believe every 9-year-old's the same because they're 9. And we don't believe every 35-year-old is the same because they're 35. People have strengths and people have weaknesses. And what we want to do is meet the child where they are and then challenge them accordingly. We don't want them struggling with things they're not ready for, and we don't want them repeating things that they've absolutely mastered if there is no use for that skill anymore and they're ready for the next step. So we have a 3-year curriculum, and children can go at their own pace. If somebody is very advanced in a subject area, they can move through that subject area as quickly as they'd like. If somebody needs more time in a subject area, they can take more time. And everybody in the classroom is doing something different at once. So there's no basis of comparison. You're not looking at each other saying, oh, I'm on page 45. What page are you on, Sarah? It lends itself to non-competition. You're competing against yourself to outbest yourself. It's like a personal record in sports. You want to constantly improve yourself.
Now, are there different things they have to get through?
Yes. So the idea is that the child at the end of the 3rd year will have mastered the 3-year curriculum. But again, they have 3 years to get it. How quickly they do something, how slowly they do something is up to the individual child.
So at the end of like their first year in that time period, they may not have completed everything in that 3-year period. So
absolutely
that's
not. It would be very rare that they would.
I didn't know that.
But we really want to meet children where they are and challenge them accordingly. So once they've mastered that 3-year curriculum, they're typically ready to move up to the next level. And each level has Montessori materials that build on the level before. They're sequential. They're didactic. They're so fun. But our goal is not for a child to graduate and need Montessori materials to do their work. We introduce something with a manipulative in a very concrete way so the child understands the concept. And then we gradually move that concept to abstraction. So when we say a child has mastered a concept, whether it's long division or anything, they've mastered it abstractly without the materials. We just don't introduce it abstractly.
You know what I noticed too with the Montessori materials, or for younger, because this probably is the same. I have to think about it if the people we have now that are from the Montessori school originally, back when they were younger, if they put the equipment away, I got to think about that. But I noticed with my son, who was Montessori till he was there from 3, 4, 5, is that he creates like a space like this mat with his work and then puts everything away, and he still works like that. And he's an engineer, actually, so it all fits. It was a right environment for him as a young person.
Yeah.
And it's, just to say, too, that I know many teachers in the public school would love to be able to have a lot of these elements of the Montessori, but it's just not possible in the public school. I mean, like River Valley Charter is a public school, but to have all of schools designed like that, which would be my dream, it would be nice, but it's just not possible. So, I mean, they're doing a very good job too in a public school, but it is very hard to do this individualized learning and letting the student go at their own pace. They have to keep up with the class, and there's a whole other issues with that, trying to keep kids going at a pace that they may not be ready for.
Well, Sarah, over the years in my career, when I had students graduate my schools and the parents would come to me and they'd say, there's no Montessori school for the next level, for high school or for middle school, or where I'm moving, and they'd say, Karen, what do? I would say, look for a program that's going to treat your kid as an individual. Just look for a program that's really going to recognize that your child, recognize your child's strengths, weaknesses, challenge them accordingly, and really see them for who they are. I think that's very important. And one of the main tenets of Montessori that we speak about is called the spiritual transformation of the teacher. And that has nothing to do with the prepared environment or the Montessori manipulatives. That has to do with the inner preparation of the adult. And I have seen teachers go through some of the best Montessori programs and still not be excellent Montessori teachers because they haven't made that spiritual transformation.
Interesting.
And I have seen adults go through some not so great Montessori programs and be amazing Montessori teachers because they just naturally get it and they've made that spiritual transformation.
So describe that a little bit, that spiritual transformation.
I think it's really an ability to value children, recognize that children are so incredibly capable that they have as much, if not more, abilities than adults. They just don't have as much experience. And in some ways, we adults are jaded because of our experiences, and kids are not. So that spiritual transformation is really having trust in children as capable human beings that do not need to be micromanaged. We give them independence, autonomy, our trust. If they spill milk, we literally do not cry over it. We give them the tools to teach them how to clean it up. And we go, oh, let me show you how to clean up a wet mess as opposed to a dry mess.
I think that sounds great.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a very respectful model.
And there definitely are teachers in public schools with that kind of the spirit and the love for children and their own self-development, and that each child is different. But it just gets hard when you have the expectations of completing a certain amount of work in a certain amount of time, and you've got to go, and yeah.
Let me tell you something, Sarah. Being a Montessori teacher is extremely difficult, and I'll tell you why. In a traditional classroom, typically, at least in my early childhood years, I didn't go to Montessori. My parents did not know what Montessori was. I was 19, and I was studying psychology in college when I discovered the Montessori method, and that changed my whole life. Let me tell you something, Sarah. It is really difficult to be a Montessori teacher. I went to traditional school growing up, and my recollection is that we all did the same thing at the same time. We followed along in a textbook or we listened to a teacher lecture, but all of my peers and I were doing the same thing at the same time. In a Montessori classroom, everybody's doing something different. And you really have to be able to track where students are so that you can keep each one challenged. And again, everyone's doing, at a different level, doing a different work. And the teacher is really a guide to ensure that children are continuously being challenged, mastering concepts that have been introduced to them, and getting help that they need in areas where they need it.
Are there ways to track? I vaguely remember Sharon at the Montessori School, who I just recently saw. It's just so wonderful to see people in the community that you were associated with when your child was young and learning all these unbelievably important things. How to track like how far a student is in one of their works or whatever area that they're in.
Sure. I mean, there's tracking sheets, there's software programs nowadays.
Oh, of course there is.
A Montessori teacher, the biggest form of assessment in Montessori is observation.
I see.
No test, no form, no sheet gives us the type of information that observation gives us. And it is...
Well, at the end of the 8th grade, your students do a celebration of learning.
At River Valley Charter
Yes.
School, they do a celebration of learning where it's their capstone project
Yes.
and their capstone year, where they talk about their life, their journey, and how their Montessori experience has impacted that journey. So every student's story is different, and it's a really beautiful celebration of life and learning.
Yeah, I've been to several, and I have to say, it's amazing what they come up with. It's really stunning. It's really a very adult presentation, full of life experiences, and of course their written projects, and all of the different things they're doing. Putting it all together for that project, and it's always so much fun to be invited and to view what a student has learned over from 1st to 8th grade, or in some cases if they came in 4th grade or whatever it is, but to put it all together into one presentation, which I don't know, I think that students get to do that, but not so, well, I'm not sure in 8th grade here, but definitely in high school they do some more of those projects.
Montessori is a very advanced method. We don't push lessons on students. The materials are so beautiful. We hope that students are drawn to the works on the shelves and are intrinsically motivated. That is our goal. We do not believe in rewards and punishments. We want children to work for their own enjoyment, their own love of learning. So having these gorgeous, really fun Montessori materials to engage with and manipulate are helpful, but they also allow us to teach some really advanced concepts. In my schools over the years, I've seen students in 4th through 6th grade doing beyond algebra, doing even trigonometry.
Wow.
But they're using manipulatives. Now, those manipulatives in the 4th through 6th grade, again, they're sequential, so they build on the manipulatives that they've used in 1st through 3rd grade, and those build on the manipulatives that they use in preschool, 3 to 6 years old. And let me tell you something, if you've ever seen a Montessori toddler program, it is so incredibly beautiful. The first time I watched a Montessori toddler program, I stood at a one-way window and I just cried, tears of joy. I watched
so
students
beautiful.
in diapers, 16 months old, pouring their own milk into a bowl of cereal and then sitting down and eating it, or cutting their own melon with a special toddler knife and then sitting down eating it. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, one of the things I remember, not to bring it back to me and my son, but it was just so wonderful. He was actually often redirected away from the blocks because all he wanted to do was work with these blocks. They were like little like triangles and all this stuff. And he and another young boy, his name was Dean, would that's all they wanted to do. And it's interesting because I think it helped develop the spatial thinking that he has. It has made him the engineer that he is today.
I was just going to ask you, Sarah, what's he doing today?
He's a marine engineer, and he has to solve a lot of problems of a lot of moving parts, and he just loved those blocks. I don't know if he remembers them, but he loved them.
Yeah. Well, same thing. My two children, they're in their 20s now, but they went through Montessori, and I remember walking into my son's room. He loves to fish, and we bought him a a fly tying vise to make flies for fly fishing. And we walk into his room, and it looked like he was doing surgery. The precision that he was tying these flies with. I mean, that comes from his Montessori years.
I would have to agree. I think that's true. So how do the students transition into, like, from the charter school here, it would be 8th grade into 9th grade. I know other places might be 9th grade into 10th grade, but how is it going here, or how are there things that all charter school students experience?
I would say it's a Montessori
Or
thing.
Montessori school. Montessori school.
Any Montessori school that I have led in any state, I have heard the same feedback, and I always ask parents, how did your child transition? How did it go? How are they doing? And I have consistently heard the same feedback. I also hear this from the local teachers, whether they're middle school teachers or high school teachers. And again, whether it's here in Newburyport or in another state, the Montessori students are the problem solvers. They're critical thinkers. They know how to learn. They're not scared to challenge the norm. They challenge the norm in a respectful way. They speak up. They're not scared to talk with adults. These are beautiful things to hear. They are over-prepared. They are well-prepared. We'd often think that in a Montessori school, which tends to be smaller, that the transition to a larger school or a traditional school would be hard. But we've taught them how to learn. You see, our focus is not a right answer. Our focus is giving a key to a love of learning for a lifetime. And that's what we want. We want our kids to love learning so they continue that journey even after they graduate their Montessori schools.
Right.
We want them to love research and to explore what interests them and become their best self.
So what kind of advice or what would you say to a parent who's thinking about Montessori education and is unsure or has not experienced it before, within their, other friendships or family or something like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've been in Montessori for 37 years, and I like to say I still learn something new every single year. I think the best advice I could give to parents is this method is for most children. It is not for all adults. If you are going to be a Montessori parent, the way this is going to work best is trust the method and encourage independence at home. The best thing parents can do to partner with a Montessori school is to really teach independence at home, trust the child, and trust the school. It's really hard, children, it's hard to let go. It's hard for parents. It's hard for us as parents to let go. And it's hard to trust someplace else. And so it's easy to give, not intentionally, but to inadvertently give a mixed signal. Like, I trust this place, but I don't trust this place. So the parent who looks through the window or lingers in the parking lot, they can, again, inadvertently be giving their child a message of, I chose this school because I trust this school, but I'm really not sure. And it's not intentional, but and I get it. I was a nervous parent when my daughter was 3 years old and started her Montessori school. I had to have my ex-husband drop her off at school because I was a nervous wreck and I didn't want her picking up my vibes, my intensity. I also think encouraging independence at home is the best thing parents can do to partner in the Montessori method, other than trusting the school that they choose. Children are born and they're so dependent on us, right? They're infants. They are 100% dependent on adults. And then all of a sudden, they could do it themselves. They could walk. They could do things by themselves. But we as adults are now, it's habit for us to do things for them.
Yes.
And it's sometimes difficult
To let go.
And to
Yes.
accept that they could do it themselves and they don't need me as
Yeah.
much. But it's a
So
really
true.
beautiful thing at the same
Yeah.
time. So it's very hard, and it was hard for me as a parent, too. I don't always wear my Montessori hat at home.
Right.
But in the classrooms, we're really, it's set up to be successful for children. Success breeds success. Failure breeds failure.
Mm-hmm.
We all make mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. But if we're berated for them or shamed for them,
Right.
we just want to hide in a corner under a table.
It makes you afraid to try
Exactly.
again.
But when you're not shamed for a mistake, it empowers you. It's like, okay, mistakes are okay. It normalizes making mistakes. And it encourages you to keep going. And then when you've done something that you feel good about, you have confidence to keep going and try the next step and take on that next challenge. And success breeds success. So we don't want to offer false praise. As a matter of fact, we don't even believe in praise. We believe in feedback and input, but we don't believe in punishments. We don't believe in rewards. And with that means praise. I don't want to hear good job. If somebody says to me good job, I'm going to look and say, well, tell me exactly what did I do that was good. I want specific feedback.
I know on those forums that when you're a person invited to one of these celebrations of learning, you have forms to fill out that ask about feedback specifically. And I know that that's one of the things, like the student doesn't want to hear, oh, just yay.
Right.
They want to hear some specifics about what I really thought or what I really enjoyed or whatever those things are. Now, I'm sure there's misconceptions about the Montessori school because I used to
yes.
hear it all the time for Matthew. I'm like, oh, what kind of, must be a free-for-all in there. And it's very hard to explain. So what are some of the misconceptions that you've come across?
Well,
or that
you just said it.
understand?
That is the biggest misconception. We have a phrase in Montessori, and it's follow the child. We have several phrases, but one of the most famous ones is follow the child. You can't follow a child if they're running into traffic. So, follow the child, what does it mean? It's a huge misconception. A lot of people believe follow the child means you let them do what they want all day. Absolutely not. There is a freedom of choice within limits. So follow the child means, as I said earlier, we meet the child where they are. When students start at the beginning of the year, we observe them, we see where they're at. Of course, we try to get information from any prior schooling that they have. But the biggest source of assessment is observation. We decide where to start them, challenge them accordingly, allow them to pursue their interests. But if a student is only interested in math and they don't like doing language, that doesn't mean they don't have to do language work or vice versa. It is our job as the adults to challenge them, to make sure they are getting all that they need, all the lessons in all the subject areas, but without forcing. So if Matthew is really interested in cars,
Yes.
and he's not so interested in language work, I might use cars to encourage him to write, or get a bunch of books about cars to encourage him to read.
Yeah, that's so nice that it can be so individualized, actually.
Exactly. But there is a curriculum, and it's a very set curriculum, and our goal is for children to master the entire curriculum before they graduate.
Now, are the teachers, what are they required to have if they're going to be a Montessori teacher?
Montessori training and certification.
Ah.
And that is not a 2 to 3 week program. It is actually a 2 to 3 year program. Now, someone can get trained in the Montessori method in a year, but they would have to quit their job and go to a full-time program. Most Montessori programs nowadays are designed for people who are working or already teaching or in a classroom or assisting in a classroom. So many of them are designed to where the bulk of the content is delivered over the summers or on evenings and weekends. I was a teacher trainer for many, many years, and I would spend all days Saturdays teaching, and evenings and summers.
I think that's important to have, to understand the specifics of Montessori. I just wasn't sure. I know my neighbor who, both of our boys, she had a couple of girls too, went to the Montessori in the street, and they also did go to the charter school, and I believe she became certified in teaching. And it was a long road. It is a lot to learn. I mean, for teaching here, I think for any teachers, I think you have to have, I know you have to pass a general certification statewide, the state certification for teachers, but I'm not sure. I guess you have to maybe have some subject area. I mean, geez, I sound like I don't know anything about education, but I don't remember exactly what it takes. I know it takes a lot to be a teacher, and I know a lot of teachers go on to get their master's, some before they even start teaching, because it is much better and it's easier for them to get a job with their master's.
Well, beyond the Montessori certification, the requirements would depend on whether it's a public school, a private school, a public charter school. I think that determines. In private school, you have much more freedom to do what you want. Historically, I've always required my teachers to hold, at minimum, a bachelor's degree plus their Montessori certification in the level in which they teach, of course.
I know that the community, because I've been here for a long time, and was here when the charter school sort of bloomed and grew. Everyone was so excited that there's a charter school for the kids to continue from the early programs that were here. So we're just really fortunate, I think, to have that kind of
It really is
school.
Wonderful. This was my first experience in public charter Montessori. I come from the private sector, and it was really neat to see it implemented in this way.
What is the outdoor component? I know I was just checking your notes, and had read about Maria Montessori when she was actually, I want to say it was in India. She was outdoors, and then she realized the importance of the outdoors and added some elements.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, Maria Montessori wrote a lot about the importance of the connection to nature and the outdoors. And if you just think about how calming nature is, not just for children, but for adults, it is really, a zen place to be and very calming, typically, unless you're hearing a lot of traffic or smelling a lot of pollution. She wrote about having outdoor classrooms, which are extensions of the inside classroom. So in a typical quintessential Montessori school, every classroom would have a back door that opens to a fenced-in area that is an extension of that particular classroom. It is not a shared space. It is just for that classroom.
Wow, how nice.
Yep, and it's an area for students to do work outside, wash windows, paint, garden, sweep, or sit there and do a math lesson while listening to birds. It's a really beautiful thing. She also wrote about middle school's connection to the outdoors taking place on farms. And there's a special name for that, and it's called air kinder.
Oh, nice.
And she believed that once children get to the adolescence plane of development, they are able to work on a farm and enjoy the benefits of not only farm life, but economics and learning how to use resources from nature and farming to run an industry and a business.
It's so interesting. That would be so wonderful if all classrooms had a door to the outside, separate. that space, because it
Yeah.
is so important, and it is, they talk more and more about nature and it's, what it does for us, adults, of course, children, but, it helps to calm the nervous system and all that stuff. And I think it is, we do end up so much of the time inside.
Yeah.
Fortunately.
In some of my previous schools, the middle schoolers have raised chickens and then sold the eggs, or kept bees and then sold honey. There's so many things that they can do, but it's really up to them. We want them to come up with the ideas, and not for ideas to be adult imposed.
So over your career, what's something that, if you could think of what you'd want a child to take away from a Montessori program, and from your experience and your own growth of what you learned over from starting at just understanding it from the class in psychology to actually running a whole community for Montessori, or the Montessori community, what's an important key lesson?
I think the emphasis on grace and courtesy is probably the biggest thing that I would want students to hold with them when they leave. In Montessori, we teach 3 R's: respect for the self, respect for others, and respect for the environment. And this really partners with something we speak about a lot, and that's grace and courtesy. And those, respect, grace, courtesy, those all go together. We are creating citizens of the world. And I think that is so much more important than academics. And so I want students leaving feeling good about themselves, embracing mistakes, knowing it's okay to make mistakes, challenging the norm, having self-confidence. And I think what I've really enjoyed seeing from both students who have graduated and then my own children, watching their peers who have graduated, is that real level of just confidence and being able to engage with adults in a very respectful but kind way.
Yeah, it is very important. And just for clarification, I know that you do feel that learning the math and all those things are important, but the underpinning of learning how to have good character and be able to function in a classroom too, in this kind of multi-age and multi things going on at the same time classroom, is something that is going to take a lot of grace and courtesy too, I would imagine, because you have to share all of the resources and you have to share the teachers' time and attention. So I think that it is nice to put that first. I mean, I think that is a nice thing too. Would be good lesson.
You're right. I remember years ago having a parent come observe a preschool class, and afterwards she suggested buying more of a certain material. It was the stamp game, actually. I remember this very clearly because she saw students waiting. But that's what we want. We want children learning delayed gratification. We want them learning how to share.
Yeah,
and we
that's a good
want them
point.
being able to move on to something else if something's not available, because that's real life.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned the multi-age classroom again. I'd love to explain and talk a little bit about why we have 3 ages in a classroom and the benefits of the multi-age classroom.
Okay, I'd love to hear it.
There's 3 reasons that I think of when I think of the multi-age classroom. The first reason I've touched on a little bit. We do not believe that every child is at the same level because they're the same age. So having 3 years in a classroom really allows us to look at where children are, challenge them accordingly, give them lessons that will keep them challenged and keep them entertained, and hopefully having fun in their environment. But that is not based on age or grade level. That is based on development. So having 3 ages together really allows us to challenge kids according to their age and not their development. The second reason is, or the second benefit is, when I think of a traditional classroom, and again, I went through traditional school, the teacher gets a new class every year. and has to get to know the entire new group
Yeah.
of students, the personalities, and those students have to get to know their new teacher and the dynamics, the rules, the expectations of that new class. And finally, they get settled in, and we call that normalization, and they've got a groove going. And before you know it, it's the end of the school year.
Yeah. just
And
when
that whole
everything's
cycle
going.
starts again. Now let's look at a Montessori classroom. When a teacher has the same students for 3 years, each year 2/3 of the class is the same. And the teacher only gets
That's
a third
good
new students to get to know. So this teacher already has a relationship with 2/3 of the class and only has to get to know 33% of their student body each year. It's a real time save.
Yeah.
And then the third reason is my favorite reason. Children come in typically as a 3-year-old. If they're starting in lower elementary, they're a first grader. If they're starting in upper elementary, they're a fourth grader. If they're starting in middle school, they're a seventh grader. And if they're starting in high school, they're a 10th grader. They're the newbie in the class. They love it because it's so much fun, but they're new. Not only are they learning from their teachers, they're learning from their older peers. And the older
Right.
peers love helping other people.
And it's part of the program, isn't it?
It is to be helpful and peer teaching. And so the second year, though, they come back as a 4-year-old or a second grader or or as a fifth grader or as it would be an 8th grader or a 10th grader. And now they've got a year of experience under their belt. So they're really settling in as middleman. They've got a groove going. They're helping teach the new students coming in, but they're still learning from the eldest in their class. The best part is the third year, the kindergarten year, the third grade year, the 6th grade year, the 9th grade year, or the 12th grade year. Those students rule the roost. Teachers, helpers, top dogs.
Yeah.
They can run the
That's
show.
very nice.
I've always said, if my school it goes up through 6th grade, we can let the whole staff can take the day off and let the 6th graders run the school for the day, and we'd probably come back through to improvements. If my school goes up through middle school, we can all take the day off and let the 8th graders or 9th graders run the school for a day, and we'd probably come back to improvements.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is a beautiful model.
It actually would be, I'm sure they would have improvements if given the opportunity to say what isn't working from their perspective, and then they can fix it.
Exactly.
That's very empowering, I must say. Maybe a little too much by the time they get home. They try to make all
That's
the changes.
true. That's true. One of my favorite memories, though, is walking outdoors and seeing first graders having pizza at a table with 6th graders, and they chose their seats on their own. There were no stigmas about sitting with younger children. It's a community. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. I just love the Montessori method, and I can tell from this conversation how much you love it as well. Is there anything else you think we haven't covered that you'd like to share? I mean, we did hit on a lot of Montessori. I just think Maria Montessori was such a powerful person, too, just in her own life and career. It is no surprise that she came up with this amazing method.
She really was. And her son, Mario, carried on her legacy after her death. And she really did not get that involved in middle school, high school, infant, toddler Montessori. Her disciples continued that and created these programs so that the Montessori method can exist for all ages. And nowadays, actually, Sarah, there's Montessori for elderly.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense.
It really does.
Because her early years was observing people that were either had an illness, a mental delay, or were disabled. Not to say, I'm a senior too, but as we get older, there are things that can happen that make things more challenging. Certainly with some dementia or with a disability or with just a chronic illness. So I think that sounds very interesting.
It really is. And
I mean, what kind of are there materials, or it's the same idea? There's
Yes,
actual
mostly
lessons?
practical life materials. You know, if you think about people maybe knitting, sewing, you know, engaging in those real life skills, and actually we teach those things in elementary school,
Yes.
in Montessori schools, sewing, knitting, crocheting.
I have to a plug for our senior center and the Council on Aging programs. They have a lot of things that are tactile and hands-on. They do a lot. It's not just painting and games and things like that, but there's also I think there are sewing and quilting and glass making and all sorts of things, which I think they do such a wonderful program there.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I have a quote from Maria Montessori, and you had mentioned it when we started the conversation. It's 120 years, right?
January will be 120 years. January of 27 will be 120 years since the first Casa dei Bambini children's house
Yeah.
opened in Italy.
That's so amazing, and it's just still going and flourishing, and I think that's so wonderful. I thought this was a good quote from her. The greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as if I did not exist.
One of my biggest compliments in my career was when I was a Montessori teacher, and I was driving to work one day and I got stuck in traffic, and I knew I was going to be late and I was not going to be able to open my classroom. And I called my head of school and I asked her if she would open up my classroom for me. And later on that day, she said, Karen, each student walked in, said hi to her, and walked right past her and got right to work.
Yes, it's pretty amazing.
And that is what we want. We don't want them dependent on us. We want them trusting themselves. And it's a beautiful thing. And we've talked about, you know, some of the key tenets are the having a full set of Montessori manipulatives, having a trained, certified Montessori teacher, having a 3-year age cycle in the class. One thing we didn't discuss is having an uninterrupted work cycle.
Oh, yes.
We believe strongly that in preschool they should have about a 3-hour minimum uninterrupted block of time that is not, you know, it's just not disrupted. It's not disrupted with specials, with music, art, or by a teacher. And in elementary, it's typically a 4-hour uninterrupted morning work cycle. And if you think of yourself as an adult, sometimes you get started on something, and then when you get really, really into it, you don't want to be interrupted. Yeah, you know, if you have your momentum going, you want to keep it going. You know when you're ready to stop. Mm-hmm. And that's why you'll often see a snack table in a Montessori classroom where children are not eating snack at the same time,
right.
But there's one table with food on it that two children can go prepare their own snack, sit down, and enjoy a snack while they talk, like you and I, if we were to go out and have coffee and conversation. And that's what it looks like. It's extremely civilized. It's teaching real life skills, right? It's part of grace and courtesy, sitting down, having a civilized conversation.
It's so nice.
But you do it at your own pace.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know when you're hungry. You don't know when I'm hungry. I don't want to... if I can't focus on my work because my stomach's growling, I want to tend to that and take care of that. But also if I'm really concentrating and I'm not hungry, I don't want to be interrupted and stop and be told snack time and know that I'm going to miss my snack if I don't eat it.
Yeah.
So we really want to set things up for individuals, you know, to serve individual needs at the moment.
I do think that, you know, I only have one child to make any comparison to, you know, of life or the Montessori, but I do think that those early years that he spent at the N Street Montessori School really created like the kind of how he behaved the rest of his life. I see now so many of these things, you know, his work ethic, he is able to work a long time, his detail-oriented work or the, you know, attention to detail. just so many things that I think were so Montessori. And I just, again, I think we're so fortunate to have these schools here, you know, and I know there's wait lists sometimes at both schools and certainly at the charter school, but it's worth, if someone's interested, to at least get their name on there.
It really is. And sometimes Montessori schools don't have the 50-acre campuses that other schools have, or the means to have all kinds of extra things. But what they do have is so incredibly special. The Montessori method is so special.
Yeah, well, we both agree on that. I am just so delighted that you came in to talk to us about Montessori and the method. It just is so exciting to have had this opportunity, because I have loved Montessori so long, and I just, every time I see Sharon, like Matthew's old teacher, I'm just so grateful for what she gave Matthew, because she had him for 3 years. It was just really wonderful.
See, and that's a relationship.
Yes.
You remember, and I'm sure he remembers.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed coming here today and talking about my favorite things.
I'm grateful, because I think it's really important to talk about education.
Thank you, Sarah. And there are so many misconceptions about the Montessori method, so it's nice to clear them up. And
yes, and I think people that are new in the community will have an idea about the Montessori that they may not have known before, and they have some options now, which is really wonderful.
I hope so. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching Open Studios.